Welcome back, everyone. So yeah, I got a bicycle. I live in a neighborhood where I can actually ride a bike and enjoy it for the first time in 12 years, and I decided to go looking for a used bike, and I got this one for free. Yeah, no, really, I got it for nothing. It turns out my girlfriend's aunt still had her late husband's bicycle, and there it is. It's a bike that from my research, I found that it was purchased new in about 2005 or 04 or 05, and it is a Raleigh C30. This was their this is a lower end model. This is about a $250 bike new, $260, $250. Raleigh deals exclusively with bike shops, so this is not a Walmart bike, but it is, or a department store bike. But it isn't that much nicer than a department store bike. I'll just say that right out. It is a 15-speed cruiser, 28-inch rims, Springer front end. This is a non-dampening suspension fork. This is the RST Omni, so there's no shock dampening at all. It's just a Springer front end. Comfort saddle with a suspension seat post. It's about as basic can be. It's a bike that you could commute on this thing. You could ride it wherever it's not that heavy. It's got some heft to it, but most of that heft is in the steel front fork. Now I've owned many Raleighs. When I was riding bikes as a means of transportation when I was younger, I only bought Raleigh bikes, and I don't know why. I just had some brand allegiance to these things. And it started out with a 1960s English Raleigh bike, a 3-speed men's bike that I had when I was younger. And then I bought a early 70s Raleigh Sprite sports bike, which was a 5-speed. Yeah, I think it had a 5-speed derailleur in the back and a fixed position crank. That was the. It was actually a nice bike. It was a root beer brown Raleigh Sprite, and I think the options it had the fender kit, and I think that was it. But it was my favorite bike of all time. And then when I got older and I got a steady paying job, I bought my first bike from a bike store. I bought a Raleigh M60. And prior to that, my dad gave me an older Raleigh M50, which is a mountain bike, and I rode the wheels off of that thing. And by the time I was done with the Raleigh M50, it would have cost me way too much money to rebuild it than it would be to buy a new one. So I bought the new Raleigh M60. I paid about $400 or $500 for it in 2002. And I rode that bike until I crashed and almost broke my shoulder. That crash sent me to the hospital. Actually, I had what's called a clavicle separation on my shoulder blade, and which is an injury I live with today. And then I decided to get into bicycling again by about 04, and then I bought myself the newer version of this bike. So Raleigh replaced the C series with the Mojave series, and the bike that I bought was the Mojave 4.0, which is kind of like a cruiser, kind of a comfort cruiser like this one, but a little bit newer, a little more features, I guess. Probably built a little better. And I ended up selling that bike to my uncle. He still has it to this day. It's a forest green Mojave 4.0. And I ended up, a few years later, I bought another Raleigh bike. I bought a Raleigh mountain bike. I forget which model it was, but I only had that for about a year. And then I'm like, you know what, I'm never going to ride a bike again, and I don't have room in my condo to store one, so I sold that bike for a huge loss. And here we are. So this is a C30. It's got, 15 speed. Is it 15? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 3 is 21 speeds. So 21 speed. It's got a very basic drivetrain. This is the Shimano Mega Range derailleur and sprocket set. I don't believe this is a cassette mounted unit. This is, what do they call that? It's called a free hub instead of a free wheel or something like that. So it's a very old-fashioned, very basic gear set and hub assembly. It's got a few scuffs and scratches. I cleaned it up. It was pretty disgusting. I've already done some repairs. I've re-greased the front axle. I had to pull the front axle apart, clean the bearings, grease them up, put them back in. And the head tube bearings were also pretty nasty. So I took that all apart. I cleaned and greased the head tube. When I picked it up, it was you could feel the notchiness in the bearings. It was pretty bad. What happened was the bike had been sitting in a shed, and the front of the bike was right below a window that leaked, and some mice got to it, and you can see they chewed the shit out of the hand grip and the thumb wheel for the shifter. And that's what the topic of today's video is all about. We're going to be replacing the handle grips and the shifters. Let's get it done. So where do we start? We're going to cut these off with a knife. I've got a new set of hand grips. So because it's a fairly inexpensively built bike, that means the parts are fairly inexpensive. So for $15 shipped, I got a new set of shifters. These are the RevoShift shifters. Same ones that came off, that are coming off. Comes with new cables, cable ends. Yeah, it's pretty good. I got some handle grips. The grips actually cost more than the shifter did. Go figure. But anyway, let's get it done. So I got to get a couple of tools from the garage. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to detach I think we're replacing all the cabling, so we're going to detach it from the derailleur, cut the end cap off, pull the cable through. We've got all new cable sheaths, so it should be pretty fun. Okay, so we are rolling. So recording. So removing the rear derailleur cable requires a 9mm wrench. The only other time I've ever used a 9mm wrench was on a Italian motor scooter. Now these old cables are in perfectly good condition. There's nothing wrong with the cables, there's nothing wrong with the derailleurs, but I can't just buy the rubber derailleur covering. I'm sorry, the handle grip covering. They don't sell that by itself. You've got to buy the entire shifter assembly, and it just so happens that for $15 you get to replace both shifters, which, let's be honest, are starting to look their age just from sitting around, and all new cables. So why not, right? I mean, it's such a waste, but why not? All right, let's get the rear derailleur. I'm sorry, let's get the rear shifter off. All right, to get the shifter off, looks like we're gonna need it's hard to see. What do the new ones use? It's gonna be an Allen key. So one of those. We're going to need a knife. Here's a knife. We're going to cut the original handle grips, they were getting kind of gummy, so they were pretty much end of life anyway. So no loss there. These are bicycle handle grips, especially the gummy variety. They tend to go to hell real quick. I used to get like maybe a year of riding out of one pair when I was commuting on a bicycle. That was before I had my driver's license, but I couldn't afford to insure my car. So when I was younger, the lack of insurance, or lack of funding for such, was my was what kept me on two wheels. Gotta be come on, come on, come on. There we go. Ugh. Get out of there. This blade is really dull. Yeah, really dull. And these end caps, they're kind of beat up too. So, unfortunately, the new grips come with new end caps. All right, let's get the necessary sized Allen key. We'll do it. This whole shifter should just slide off. There we go. Off we go. Probably hang on to these. These are perfectly fine. I don't know why I would get rid of them. Okay. Get the new one. We get the right one. There we go. The 7-speeder. Now this is a slightly newer design, a little bit nicer looking. If you compare them side by side, you probably can't do a comparison there. So this is kind of a side by side comparison. The newer ones are obviously much newer looking, but basically the same design, same part really, but just new. One of the first things I ever learned to fix was a bicycle, and that was out of necessity. My dad always encouraged me use whatever tools he had on hand, and he was an auto mechanic, so he had an extensive collection of tools, but he always encouraged me to kind of learn on my own. And he did that passively. Like, I would ask him, "Dad, can you fix my bike?" when I was little, 6, 7 years old. "Dad, can you fix my bike? This is wrong." And he'd say, "Well, son, the toolbox is over there." Or he'd say he'd do it, but he'd do it later. And I was an impatient little kid. I wanted my shit fixed now, damn it. So I would ask him how to do it. I'd say, "How do I do this? How do I do that?" And he was like, "Oh, well, here, do this, this, and this, and that." He always encouraged me to solve my own problems. And I gotta be honest, I feel bad for kids who have parents who run around behind them cleaning up their fires and putting out their fires and cleaning up their messes with a checkbook. My parents didn't have the kind of money to do stuff like that. They didn't have endless piles of cash to bail me out whenever I broke something or when something failed or I had to replace. They just didn't have the money. And if they did, I never knew about it. But no, seriously, my dad was instrumental in making me learn how to fix my own stuff, because that's how he did it as a kid. That's how he managed to survive when all the kids he hung out with, they had nice new shiny stuff, and my dad, he just had what was left, hand-me-down bikes and hand-me-down clothes, and the guy knew how to sew his own clothes when he was in elementary school because he had to. And that's kind of how I was raised. Solve your own damn problems. Fix your own damn bike. And you'll do much better in life than if I write a check to do it, to pay somebody else to do it for you. Okay, so we got all new cable sheaths. We don't need them, but why don't we use them? I probably should shoot a little bit of oil in these for lubrication. They actually make cable lubrication oil. I don't have any, so I'm going to use 3-in-1. It's good stuff. It works. Probably not the right thing to do, but you don't put a lot of it. You just kind of lightly coat the cable in oil and give it something to just build up a little oil film there. You don't need to go crazy. In fact, oil attracts dirt in an unsealed system like this. So you want to not go crazy. You know, just don't go nuts. But this is a bike that has seen not many miles. Just by judging from the tires, the condition of the original tires is incredible. When I got this bike, I thought for sure I was on the hook for new tires because they looked, well, it had been sitting in a shed that was infested with mice. And the mice, after the tires deflated, the mice managed to pull the rim liners out and chew on them. And after looking at you're discovering that problem, I'm like, well, there's no way that these tires and tubes are going to be any good. It just wouldn't be possible. So I brought the bike home and I took the tires off the rims. I looked at the tubes by themselves and I realized very quickly that the tubes were still holding air. A very small amount of air, so they weren't blown out. The rim bands, liners, bands, whatever you call them, they were done for. They were absolutely destroyed. The tires themselves had no signs of dry rot. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, you know what? Let's take some electrical tape. I've done this before, you know, as a kid, not a lot of money. Got plenty of electrical tape though. So I just went ahead and I made my own rim bands out of electrical tape. I put like 3 or 4 layers of tape around there, and it usually does the trick. I'm not running Tour de France on this goddamn thing, so no harm, no foul. So I pumped up put the tires back on, put the tubes back on, pumped them up, and they've been holding air ever since. That was a week ago. But we're just about done with this derailleur cable. Just got to clean up some dirt deposits that are down here. Run the cable into the cable receiver. Make sure it's. Oh wow, this is the cable's being quite stubborn. Make sure it's in the cable track thingy. Oh, I know why. I have to run it through. There's a little. Yeah, okay. I see what I did wrong. There we go. That'll do her. There we go. Just put a few drops of oil down the tube. Easier to just lube the cable again. So no, none of my bicycles have ever seen the inside of a bike shop after I purchased them. I do my own repairs. I clean my own chains. I used to do this as regular maintenance. I would take the chain off using a chain remover tool. I have one still somewhere. And I just pop the chain off. I used to put them in a tub of gasoline. And that's how I would clean my chains. It's always worked for me. The problem is, what do you do with all that old gasoline once you've contaminated it with grease and dirt? You sure can't put it in the lawnmower, that's for sure. So you gotta just let it sit around and it'll eventually evaporate. That's not the right thing to do, folks. That's not the right thing to do. But anyway. Alright, the cable's in. Now we just need to get the shifter. We're going to get it put into the first gear position. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we're going to try to align the derailleur to that position. And we're going to need to do some adjustments later on down the line, but that's okay. That's why we have adjusters. Then cinch it down with a 9mm wrench. Where is that 9mm wrench? Does anybody know where my 9mm wrench is? Because I do. Put it up in there. So I haven't really worked on a bike since early 2000s, roughly, give or take. Okay, so now it's just a matter of getting the derailleur adjusted. See how it works in this position. A little bit of grinding. So then we visually inspect to see whether the derailleur is too far in, too far out. Make our adjustments from there. It's definitely too far out, so we're gonna to adjust that. I'm gonna pull the cable adjuster out a little bit. When you're done, once you've got your cables routed and you're not going to undo them anymore, you can then put the end cap on. This is a crimp-on. Just slide it in there. I'm going to use my electrical wire or electrical connector crimper for that. It'll work. It'll do the trick. And there you go. Good as new. Better than new. Yeah. That was easy. Now we just put the handle grip on and call it a day. Alright, the front derailleur is basically the same deal, only it uses a hex wrench to loosen the cable clamp. Yeah, these are very inexpensive bike components for sure. Definitely not high-end. The whole bike is, you know, I'd say casual rider, you know, that kind of thing. It's nothing fancy for sure, but you don't need to spend a whole lot of money on a bike to get something that's decently rideable. The only thing about Walmart bikes, store brand bikes, or department store bikes, is that parts availability can be a challenge. Because it turns out, unlike the old days, a lot of the department store bikes are built with custom-made parts that are made very cheaply and can't easily be found in your local bike shop. And unfortunately, sometimes the bike makers don't sell the parts for them after so many years. And, so, for example, you might have a hard time finding replacement bearings, or a lot of times, though, the shifting components and the brakes are usually off the shelf, but they're going to be lower end, kind of like what we see here. Again, this is a bike store bike. You know, this is a very inexpensive bike that you might find in your local shop, but it does use standard Shimano shifters and Tektro brakes, and so you can find parts for this pretty easily. But when you start looking at, like a Huffy or a Magna or whatever they sell these days, it might have a custom front suspension fork that you can't get anywhere, and the head tube size may be non-standard. So now that we have our shifters and cables replaced, and I've already completely adjusted this bike. I spent the past half hour just tuning it, fine-tuning it, and tuning it some more. But what you got to do, once you've replaced all those cables, you've got to start adjusting things. So the best thing to do, if you don't have a bike stand, is to suspend the bike from the ceiling, as I've done here. So that way you can rotate the pedals, and yeah, these rims are a little out of true, and I can't seem to get the brakes adjusted correctly because there's a bit of a warp to the wheel. That is probably a factory defect, but it can be fixed. I don't do trim. I don't true rims. I've never done one. I don't want to. They're a lot of work. So I could bring these wheels to my local bike shop and have one of their expert rim guys or gals do the deed. Yeah, I give up on that. So anyway, so how to adjust your derailleurs? Now this is real. This is the same procedure you're going to use if you buy a bike from Walmart and it doesn't shift into the correct gears, or if you just bought a bike from a bike shop a couple years ago and it's out of adjustment because the cables have stretched. So what I do is I start off in the middle. So the front chain ring, I select the middle gear, and that's going to be your main traveling gear, and then you adjust up or down on the rear as you're moving along. So what I do is I start off in the first gear, and then I try to adjust the derailleur position using a combination of cable position through these cable adjusters or the high-low adjustments on these on the back of the derailleur. So your high adjustment is actually this gear here, your highest ratio gear. Your low adjustment is your lowest ratio gear. This is high, this is low in terms of what these adjusters do. And when you're in the middle of the chain wheel, it's really it's up to the cable position at that point. So this is adjuster. The adjuster will adjust the position in this gear or this gear. Does that make sense? That's what these are for. So these are your high limit, your low limit. And what I want to do is make sure that these jockey wheels are perfectly in line with that cogwheel right there. So make sure that's all nicely lined up. And then you're going to crank the pedals and listen carefully for any grinding. All I hear, I do hear a little bit of grinding actually. So we could probably stand to do some adjusting there. Of course the bike is bouncing all over the place. And I hear my stupid brakes. Here, let's get these brakes disconnected. I hate these brakes. I'm sorry. There we go. A little bit of I hear a little bit of cog noise. So I'm looking at this. Now you can actually see pretty clearly that my derailleur is off. It's actually in a little bit too far. So we're going to take our low adjuster and we're going to adjust it accordingly. Just make sure that you're in the right gear on the shifter. Yeah, we're just dandy there. So I'm going to crank my low adjuster, which is the one on the bottom here. You're going to get rid of that little kink that we have. I'm going to do this by eye here. Yeah, I can see it. That may not be so bad. I mean, this is a very low-end derailleur, so. Yeah, I think the derailleur is actually bent just a little bit. God bless these high quality. Yeah, the derailleur is a little bent. I don't think we're going to be able to adjust that away. Yeah, it's just a cheap derailleur. All right. Does sound better though. Okay. So first gear is good. Now let's start rolling it down. Now when you start having gear skipping and grinding when you're in the second, third, fourth, and fifth gears, that's a cable adjustment situation. You want to look at your cable position. Definitely make improvements there. Second gear sounds good. Fourth, fifth, seventh. And then you want to index shift it back up. We skipped a gear here. Let's try that again. That's 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and finally 1. So we got it right. Now I did spend a lot of time fine-tuning it, and then I noticed that the derailleur was a bit off-center on the first gear, so we had to make some adjustments there. Okay, that's the easy part. Then you want to go through your low range and high range gears. So we're going to do that right now. So let's get it rolling. And we're going to go into first gear, or low range. Okay. Now you're listening for any rubbing on the front derailleur. And then you're going to adjust the derailleur position. Now these derailleurs tend to grind. I'm finding every bike I've had with this setup here, it tends to grind if you're in low range, grinding low on the crank, and you're in high range gear on the rear. They always seem to grind a little bit, or rub. And that's because they're not really designed to run in that gear. I just don't think they were designed to, I mean, what situation would you need to be all the way at grinding low over here, and in your highest gear in the back? I don't understand. But they're not designed for that, seemingly. Okay, now let's check our high range. And again, we're going to get some rubbing on the high range when we're in our lowest gear in the back. It's going to rub a little bit. You just try to tune that out by adjusting your limit adjusters a little bit here and there. And maybe cable position. So let's run it through the rear. See, it's having a hard, there it goes. So, a couple of things. When dealing with especially low-end components like this bike has, you're gonna have some grinding, you're gonna have some hiccups shifting gears occasionally. That's one thing I've noticed. Like, I had it shifting perfect, and then all of a sudden it would, you know, it would just skip a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's fine. Or it might delay the engagement of one gear here and there. These derailleurs, there's a lot of play in them. They're not perfect. I could certainly upgrade the derailleurs on this bike, but I'm not going to, because it's not something I'm not going to be, again, I'm not driving this bike cross country. I'm just going to ride it around town occasionally on nice hot summer days. And that's about it. It's just a fun bike to toy around with. That's all it is. As long as it shifts in all gears, it's not grinding consistently, I'm happy with it. And if I were to develop a taste for more extensive cycling, I'd probably upgrade the bike rather than upgrade the components, because you get into some major expenses when you start replacing factory parts with upgraded ones. As of right now, the bike is in mint condition. It's got all new hand grips, new shifters now because the rubbers were ruined by mice, and I even added this cycle computer so I know how fast I'm going. You know, you gotta know, right? You gotta know. I've already given it a coat of wax, but I think I got grease all over the frame from all the work I've done to it, so I'll probably clean it up a little bit more. I might put a rack on it. If not, I might try to find a set of rear... Fenders are nice to have. I might try to find a set of fenders because, you know, to keep my back dry if I hit a puddle or something. But it's a good little bike. I mean, I haven't ridden it yet. Actually, I haven't ridden this bike yet. I've just been repairing and tuning, and I might send the wheels off to get trued. I think it's worth it. The last time I had that done, it cost me all of like $20. It wasn't expensive. It was really cheap money to send the rims out to the local bike shop and just get them trued. They're definitely worth, because the brakes are constantly rubbing on this thing and I can't seem to adjust it away. That might be my best choice, my best method there. So, well, I think I'm gonna take this thing out on the road and give it a quick test run, see how she does. Wish me luck. Have a great day. So, the girl and I went out for a little bike ride. We did about 2 miles, 2.29 miles, and bike performed flawlessly. I haven't ridden a bike in 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years. It's been a while, and yeah, first trip out, and not too bad. Didn't skip or jump. The brake pad's a little dry. I think I might put some pads on it. They don't sound so hot. But I kind of expected that, given the age. The bike is about 15 to 17 years old, so kind of expected that. But yeah, I think she'll do it. I'm going to probably take this Made in China badge off the head tube, because it doesn't really, yeah, I think it cheapens the bike, if that's even possible. It's a very light bike. I mean, it rides like a light bike. It's got 28-inch wheels, so I mean, it rolls nice. What can I say? It's not the most comfortable bike, for sure. Not the most comfortable. And it's not the most precise driveline, you know, so. But for the retail price of around $270, $260, whatever, it's not a bad little machine. Not a bad machine at all, and it's better than anything you're going to buy at Walmart or Target. The thing about the Walmart, Target bikes, I used to work for Walmart, and I knew the guy who built the bikes quite well. And there were 2 guys doing it, and neither of them were mechanics. And most of the bikes that left that shop had underinflated tires. The derailleurs were way out of adjustment. The brakes are out of adjustment. Parts were put on backwards, or not on correctly, or not tight enough. You buy a bike from a bike shop, and it's usually going to be pretty competently assembled. It's going to be adjusted. And if it's not, you can always go back and they'll readjust it. You have a Walmart bike that's out of adjustment, you bring it back to the store, you get another bike. There's the difference between a Walmart bike and a bike store bike. Even though they may share some of the same components. For example, these shifters, these brake levers, you might find these on a Walmart or Target bike. The overall quality of the frame and the welds and everything will be better on something like this Raleigh. I actually bought a bike from a Walmart once. It was a beach cruiser, and I bought it to use for like a weekend or something. I forget what the deal was. The welds on the frame looked like they came out of a toothpaste tube. And I mean, the bike was, for all intents and purposes, unrideable, just because the geometry was way off. You couldn't really ride it without hitting your knees on the handlebars. It was a very strangely configured frame, but that one ended up getting crushed. I got rid of it. Well, I hope that this video is remotely entertaining and useful to somebody. Keep your head up high and hope for the best. We'll get through this disaster. All of us will. What am I trying to say? The global human race will get through this, hopefully. But if you have a bike, now's a great time to go out and just go for a ride. You know, good time to do it. Not a lot of cars in the road, but you got to be really careful, because the cars that are on the road are doing about 100 miles over the speed limit. So, yeah. At least you'll die faster, I guess. I don't know. Have a good one.